What's up, guitar arranger, potentially? I'm going to show you the exact software that I use to make arrangements that are faster, better, and easier than not using the software that I'm going to be talking about using in this video. Okay, let's go. So arranging is very difficult. I don't know if you have realized that, if you've tried to arrange stuff for guitar, and that's because there are so many problems involved in arranging. So I made a graphic that represents all of them, okay, that I can think of. I'm gonna put right there on the screen, and you've got adding notes, removing notes, deciphering rhythms, song selection, choosing a piece of music, right? Not confusing the melody. I already lost count, dude. I already lost count. Fingering, how you actually, work out the fingering for a piece of music. Pitch recognition, right? This is like the fundamental ear training thing that you need to do when you guitar arrange. Transposition, what key do I do the thing in? Element hierarchy, okay? Like what's the most important thing at any given time, right? Creativity, how do you wanna make the piece your own or whatever? Some people think of it that way. I don't usually think about that much, but some people do. Note input, how do you actually get the notes into the piece of software or on the page or in your head or whatever, right? How do you actually record what you're doing as far as like hit this note, then hit this note. Changing notes. There might be some notes that you need to change because you want to, because it's not practical to play them where they are right now, right? And note location. So of the notes that you choose, where do you actually play them on the guitar? So that's a whole lot of stuff, right? That's a whole lot of things to be worried about, and those are the things you need to worry about when you're arranging music for guitar. I ask you this: if you're somebody who's arranging for guitar, or you're interested in getting started with arranging, why would you do this crazy mega difficult task of guitar arranging without using every possible shortcut, every possible tool, every possible piece of software to make the process easier and faster and better that you possibly could? You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to sit there with a pen and paper or like figure out your arrangements, like all in your head or something. You don't have to do that. Maybe you had to do that like 10, 15 years ago, but there's some rad software that exists now that makes the process way easier, way faster, that gives you way more power over the information that you're dealing with when you're arranging, okay? So what is that piece of paper? Drum roll, you probably already know what it is, but it's called Guitar Pro, all right? And I've been using it for years, and no, I'm not sponsored by Guitar Pro. I don't have an affiliate link with Guitar Pro. I'm not a spokesperson for Guitar Pro. I didn't create Guitar Pro. I'm just a guy who has used a lot of different pieces of software, tried a lot of methods for guitar arranging, and have found that Guitar Pro is 1000% the best one. It just is, okay? And in this video, I'm going to talk about why. So the first and probably most important thing that Guitar Pro 8 specifically allows you to do, and this doesn't work with Guitar Pro 7, as soon as they released this feature, I was like, oh my God, this is going to change everything for me. And it did. Is a feature that I call syncing. So one of the raddest things about syncing is that it completely negates the need to scrub around a piece of music with an MP3 player or on YouTube or whatever. And it allows you to just select single chunks of the music that you want to hear, press the play button, and hear it. Just that. And then if I want to hear that chord again, I press the space bar. Okay? If I want to hear it again, I press the space bar. Okay? Boom. And I just hear that chunk that I want. Okay, so what I want to do is show you what a synced file actually looks like and why it's so rad. Okay, so let's go to my computer real quick. So what syncing actually allows is for your place in the score and the actual audio file to always be synced, always be in sync. So they're at the same spot all the time. So if I look at the if I click down here on the waveform, if I click right at the beginning of the first measure, you'll see that my blue line up here on the tab staff, that's right at the beginning of the first measure. Now if I go to like the beginning of the second measure, boom, I click over here, you'll see that this corresponds to that. So when I play along, you'll see that every time a new measure happens, I'm at the corresponding spot up here. So this just makes like keeping everything organized and making sure that, like, when I'm working on measure 2, I don't have to worry about where I am in the score, because my cursor is always going to be where I need it to be. Let's move beyond syncing and talk about another aspect that makes Guitar Pro so much better than, doing stuff in your head or writing stuff on paper or using other software, okay? It's the note entry process. It's basically like when you figure out a note that you want in your arrangement, how do you actually get that onto the tab? So in Guitar Pro, I will open a thing called the fretboard view. It's basically like a window that represents an entire guitar fretboard. And then when you click the strings and frets on that fretboard, it's kind of like a big grid, it will input those notes into the score. And the reason I like this is because I can sit there, with my left hand on the actual guitar, messing with different positions and everything, messing with different note possibilities. And then I have my right hand on the mouse selecting those notes. So I can just look with my eyes at what I'm doing on the fretboard and just go, okay, I'm at fret 1 on the low string, boop, and then I'm at boop, and it actually inputs that stuff into the piece of software, which is pretty rad. Now, another little hack that I do that's weird, but is also like probably the most important thing that I do as far as like saving time, is inputting rests first. So I just do all of the rhythm of the piece first. So I don't worry about the pitches. I just worry about when the pitches are happening, and I input them as rests. And the reason this is so rad is that you're essentially slicing the piece of music into selectable chunks. If you've got a chord that happens and it's a quarter note, right? And then you have another chord that happens and it's a half note, and then you have another chord that happens and it's a quarter note, and you put in a quarter rest and a half rest and a quarter rest, what you can do in Guitar Pro, which is amazing, is you can just select that first rest and you can press play, and you can just hear that one chord. It will just play that one chord. And if you press space again, it'll play it again and again. So depending on the amount of rhythmic content you select in your piece of music and press play, you'll hear just that chunk of the piece of music. And that's why it's really important to sync your file and to do it accurately. Once you've done that and once you've put in your rhythms, you can select any little chunk of the piece of music that you want, and you can press play and hear just that. And it helps so much for like hearing a chord over and over and over and over again, right? Versus having to take the playhead and scoot it back or whatever, or on YouTube pressing the back arrow or whatever to make it go back 5 seconds or whatever. That's an inefficient way of doing it. And the other thing is that I tend to go one voice at a time. What a voice is basically like the melody is a voice, okay? And that's a separate layer of music. I don't know if you ever use like Photoshop, but like layers in Photoshop. Basically, you can mess around with just that layer and not affect the other layers. So you can just mess with voice 1 and not screw with the other voices. Then the bass might be another layer or another voice, right? So the bass might be voice 2, and you can just get in there and mess with only the bass without screwing with the other stuff. Okay, so voice is also a really important feature that Guitar Pro has that makes arranging a lot easier. And the last thing I want to talk about today is note manipulation. So the great thing about using a piece of software, of course I recommend Guitar Pro 8, but you could use any piece of software, is that the information that exists in the software is now data. Okay, it's now data that can be manipulated. Now, some people actually use this archaic thing called paper, and they'll try to do their tab on the piece of paper. Now, what happens when you realize, hey, that's not the best way to do that? Or I don't like actually how that sounds. What do you got to do now? You got to use this other archaic thing called an eraser. God forbid you used ink, it becomes a mess to actually edit things. Whereas in Guitar Pro or, MuseScore or whatever, once that information exists in that piece of software, you can manipulate it. And one of the most important manipulations is note location. It's where I'm playing the notes on the guitar, right? Because we all know, like, you could have an E, You know, the E string, the open E string, for example, that particular note can be played on multiple places on the guitar fretboard. So at any given time, there's probably multiple ways that you could play the exact same pitches on guitar. Now, you don't have to go through the mental math of figuring out, okay, I could play this here or I could play it here. You could just use Guitar Pro and literally select a note and press a button and have that note jump to a different string. So literally, the way that I do this is that when I'm in the final phase of my arrangement, when I'm trying to figure out exactly what fingers I want to use and what positions I want to, you know, put those pitches in on the guitar, is I'll just select a note. I'll literally hold Alt, press up or down on my keypad, and it will jump the note to different strings. And you know, honestly, like a lot of this stuff I can do kind of without the guitar now, because I'll just make sure the numbers make sense. You know, if I see let's say it's fret 1 on the G string, for example, and then fret 12 on, you know, the high E string. Well, I could take that fret 1 on that low string and I could bump it up, and I just press a button. I see exactly where I could play that on the 5th string, for example, and I could bump it up again. Guess what? I already know that's going to be way more possible, right? So sometimes I'll just mess around with the numbers until it looks like it might make sense, right? So this is just like a quick and loose way to, you know, experiment with different positions on the guitar. Ultimately, every piece of music is different. It requires different solutions, different positions. So you do have to get in there and just mess with it and mess around. And the more experiments you can run on a particular position, basically try it in every single position, the quicker you're going to find the best one. And the quicker you find the best one, the quicker you're going to finish your arrangement. And the better it's going to be, because you are actually presenting yourself with all of the possibilities. So now Guitar Pro does so many other things I just don't have time to get into in this video. I've literally been using Guitar Pro for years and have developed so many time savers. Like, you know, how to like figure out what key to put the song in. Like, just that one is like, I could go into like an hour-long thing on just that. But if you want to learn that stuff, if you're interested in becoming a really good guitar arranger, if you're frustrated with guitar arranging and you want to take that shit to the next level, the highest level possible, I got a link for you in the description, okay? Click that and then it will take you to another page. There's a video on there. If you want to watch it, cool. If not, that's fine. And then there's a link to book a call with me. So it'll just be me and you. We can talk for a little bit. There's no pressure. Like, you know, either you're right for the course or you're not. You know, I just want to make sure it's like, you know, people are in that are a good fit. You know, I'm not going to lie to you and say like, hey, this would be perfect for you, if, you know, it's not really what you want. And some people, you know, the call also kind of helps figure out exactly what you want and what your goals are for guitar arranging and stuff like that, and your specific problems. Okay, so if you're interested in that, smash that link.